We continue now at the top of Daf Tesvav and Meseches Yoma. This is Yoma Daf 15b. The Gemara here was discussing the Mishnah, which says, Hiza mimenu al taharo shel mizbeach. They would sprinkle the blood on the taharo of the mizbeach, and the Gemara had understood that to mean halfway up the wall of the mizbeach. We'll just take a quick look at Rashi on the previous Amud before we continue. Rashi on the previous Amud said, what are we trying to prove from this? V'kevon desheva hazos hizo hamaze. Since you're doing 7 sprinklings at the middle of the mizbeach, you can't be exact. Obviously, some are going to go above the midpoint, and some are going to go below the midpoint. And the Gemara was trying to prove that you can have such a situation where you have some sprinklings of the blood above the midpoint of the mizbeach and some below. And so the Gemara says, no, that's not what it means at all. It actually means agufei the mizbeach. That Mishnah means that you're sprinkling on the top of the mizbeach. This is talking about the inner mizbeach, the mizbeach hazov. Techsiv, like the pasuk says, uche'etzam hashamayim latohar. Rashi here explains the grammar. Agufei the mizbeach al gago, on the roof. Umay loshen taharo al shem shemetaher umefana haketores. It's because what you're doing is cleansing or purifying, clearing away the ketores. Shenisraf olav baboker, because you had burned the ketores on this mizbeach in the morning. Vechoseu elach ve'elach. Now you're shoveling it aside to each direction. Umaza al makom hagiloi, and the sprinkling of the blood is taking place on the open part of the mizbeach. That's the idea of taharo shel mizbeach, the open part, the cleansed part. K'dichsiv, like the pasuk says, uche'etzam hashamayim latohar. It's the same meaning in that pasuk also. It means the clear skies, kimo l'tahar, meaning purified or cleansed. And the Gemara now returns to the opinion of Rabbi Shimon Ish HaMitzapeh, quoted on the previous Amud. He was talking about the carbon tamid, and he said that first you do the matan damim like a carbanola, and then we learn from the pasuk that the second giving of the damim on the mizbeach should be done similar to a carbon chatos. So the Gemara now asks, Ma'ishna do yoiv ola bereisha v'hadar yoiv the chatos? Why do you first apply the blood on the corner so it hits both sides at once like a carbanola, and then you do like a chatos on each side independently? Nesev bereisha the chatos v'hadar nesev the ola. Why do you first do the blood like a carbon chatos and then the ola? Why do you pick one order and not the other? So the Gemara says, Kaven da ola he, since at the end of the day the carbon tamid is a carbon ola, he kadma bereisha. That's the one that goes first. First we do the matan damim like an ola, then like a chatos. And the Gemara says, Umayshna duyav mizrachis tzefonis umaravis dromis. Why do you go to the northeast and the southwest corner? Nasiv dromis mizrachis. Instead, you should do maybe the southeast, v'hadar tzfonis maravis, and do the northwest. How do you know to do, again, northeast and southwest? So the Gemara says, Amri, they answer, Ola tu'una yisod. By the Ola, it needs to be by the yisod of the mizbeach. Rashi over here says, Ola tu'una yisod shehei dama nitan b'makom shehei yisod lamata himenu. You got to put the blood in an area where the yisod of the mizbeach is down below. It should be below, so it's got to be in the area of the yisod. And as the Gemara explains, V'keren deromis mizrachis, the southeast corner of the mizbeach, lo hava le yisod. It didn't have a yisod, so that's why they had to choose the corners as they did. And the Gemara continues, Ma'ishna duyoiv bereisha mizrachis tzefonis v'hadar ma'aravis dromis. Why do you first put the blood in the northeast side and then you put it on the southwest? Nesev bereisha ma'aravis dromis v'hadar mizrachis tzefonis. Why not start by the southwest and then go to the northeast? And for that the Gemara says, Kavan do Amar Mar, since the master said, Kol pinos she'atapona lo yehu ela derech yamin lemizrach. Anytime the Kohen would turn, they would turn to the right side. Bereisha bahu paga. So therefore, the Kohen would encounter the northeast corner first. And Rashi over here explains, Kavan damar marmi masnisin dromi bar Yecheskel hilakaman. This is later on. And Rashi continues, Lo yehu ela derech yamin lemizrach. Rashi just points out, Hachalo shayach lemizrach. Here, it's not really shaykh to say to the east. Aval bezvachim shaykh lemisni. In zvachim, that's where the word mizrach makes more sense. We won't go on to the rest of Rashi, but the point is, since it was shaykh in zvachim, since over there in context it makes sense, so we write the word lemizrach over here. Really what it should say is, all turnings should be to the right. In any case, the point is, you're going to encounter that particular corner first, as Rashi explains. When a Kohen goes up the ramp of the Mizbeach, and turns right, first you're going to encounter the southeastern corner. Now there you can't put any blood, like we said, there's no yisod. And then you're going to get to the the northeastern corner, v'nosein, and that's where you're going to put the blood. And Rashi just points out, the alfagav dematan dam eno ola bekevish. Now, even though the person placing the blood doesn't go up the ramp, so why are we talking about the ramp? Dohala ritzba omeid, because the person standing on the floor of the Beis HaMikdash, v'hakli biyado v'zorek l'meirachok, he throws from a distance, t'chsiv v'zarko dolamata min achut hu nos, and he's putting it below the chut hasikra. Afilu achi, nevertheless, kevan shebechatas shenitna bel yona shel keren, tzarech la'alos bekevish derech hadar mufon l'mizrach. Since by a chatas you would go up, so hachinami b'chol adamim afal pisha nosan lamata, so too by all the matan damim, even though you're doing it from below, maschil l'hakef miderech hadarom shu ponav shel mizbeach kepesach knisas habayis umishum pona liyamin. It's going to be a similar procedure in those cases as well. So even though again you're not going up the ramp, we apply this to all situations of matan damim. And the Gemara continues to ask on Rabbi Shimon Ish HaMetzapa's position, umimai diva'olahu to ka'amar achmano avid b'mais chatas. This pasuk that compared the ola to the chatas, how do you know it means that for a carbon ola like the carbon tamid, you should do something that you do by the carbon chatas? Maybe it's the reverse. V'dilma b'chatas hu to ka'amar achmana avid b'maisa ola. Maybe what the pasuk really means is that there's a certain carbon chatas that you should do something that you normally do by a carbon ola in that situation. Rashi over here says, Dilma bechatas de Rosh Chodesh, Amar Achmana. Maybe by the carbon chatas you bring on Rosh Chodesh, the pasuk is saying, Avid Bei Maisa Ola, you should treat it like an Ola. Again, the pasuk over there in context was talking about the carbonas that are brought on Rosh Chodesh. So how do you know which way to apply it? And to that the Gemara says, Lo Sal Kadaitach, don't think that is the case. Because the pasuk says, Al Olas Hatamid, Yeyosev Vinisko, on the carbon Olas Hatamid. Mai Ka'amar Achmana, what does the pasuk mean? Midi de chatas, something that you normally do by a carbon chatas, shadi ola. You should do it instead. Place it on the carbon ola. Rashi over here says, Lo sal kadaitach tichsiv lechatas al olas. It says the chatas on the ola. So again, you do something that you do by a carbon chatas, by a carbon ola. And the Gemara continues, Tanan Hasam, we learned over there in a Mishnah, this is a Mishnah Meseches Talmud, Amar lehem hamemuna, the appointee, the deputy Kohen Gadol said to them, Tz'u v'haviu telem milishkas beis hatzloim, go bring a sheep from the chamber of the sheep. And the Mishnah continues, V'alo lishkas hatzloim haisu b'miksoat tzvonis ma'aravis. This lishka was found in the northwest corner. V'arba lishkas hayisham, there were 4 chambers in that area. Achas lishkas hatzloim, one was called the lishkas hatzloim. V'achas lishkas hachosamos, one was the lishkas hachosamos. V'achas lishkas beis hamokad, one was the lishkas beis hamokad. V'achas lishkas she'osin bo lechem ha'aponim, and one was the lishka where they made the lechem ha'aponim. Rashi here explains. Tanan Hasam Meseches Talmud, v'lo shayach lemikveh Gemara de Yuma. Rashi first says this entire sugya doesn't really need to be Meseches Yoma. El mishon demayri leil b'shinoi ki agavna mantana seder Yuma, Rabbi Shimon Ish HaMetzapi. Just because before the Gemara had wanted to say who is the Tan of the Mishnah in Meseches Yoma, it's Rabbi Shimon Ish HaMetzapi. Lo shamino le damar hachi el mishon de shamino le de palaga seder Talmud. And why did we say that he's the author of the Mishnayos in this Masechta? Because we find that he argues on the Tan in Meseches Talmud. So mukmei l'stami de pligi haTalmud alibei. So we say any Mishnah that seems to argue probably follows him. Since we don't find such a sugi like this where we say stam mishnayos follow a certain tana, we find that particularly in this sugya. So we have this, we put this sugya over here as well, the mesuk manami b'hachshitza, because that's going to be a similar approach in this Gemara where we're going to take a look at mishnayos and try to figure out which mishnayos follow which tana. So Hamamuna hu askan, again, that's the deputy Kohen Gadol. Ve'eviu l'tamid mi lishkas hatzloim she'yu hatzloim sham mivukarin. This was the lishka where they had checked sheep that were kosher to be karbonos. Va'alo kamo va'arehi b'makom ploni. The Mishnah is saying, by the way, that lishka is found b'miksoat tzvonis ma'aravis. Again, it was in the northwest corner. Shel beis hamokad, meaning the northwest corner of the beis hamokad. She'yitraklim gadol. This was a large open area. V'hayamasikin bo meduros gedolos lischamim sham hakohanim. They used to make bonfires so it would be warm for the kohanim. Sholchim yechefim al ritzbas azar, because they would walk barefoot on the azara. Shishal sheish, which was marble. V'hayu b'miksosel lishkos psuchos kikatronios. And they had in the corners some smaller chambers that opened in psuchos l'traklin, that opened into this large open area. Kediktoni l'kamon v'arba lishkos hayusham b'dalet hamiksos achas lishkas hatloim v'chulu. That's what it means over here. There were 4 lishkos that opened up into the large area of the traklin, and that corner, again, this one was in the northwest corner, and then you had the lishkas hachosamos, what was that? Shamanichan sham chosamos shalokeach, siltos unesachim and a hekdesh bedam. They had these seals that acted as receipts. So if you purchased a certain item, you would show the receipt, and that's how you would collect that particular item. Lishkas Beis Hamokad, Lishka Ketana. This was a smaller chamber. Shekruya Beis Hamokad. That was called the Beis Hamokad. Upsucha Beis Hamokad Hagadol. That was open into the Traklin, which was the larger Beis Hamokad. That's why the Traklin was the Beis Hamokad, the large one. And again, in the four corners, you had these small mini chambers. And then you had one Sha'osim Bo Lechem Aponim Shal Beis Garmuos and Sham Ma'aseh Lechem Aponim Shal Yusham. Again, this was a particular family that made the Lechem Aponim. So that's what that's how the Mishnah describes the Lishkos in Meseches Talmud. And the Gemara now has a contradiction from Meseches Midos. So in we have the following contradiction. It says, Arba Lishkos Hayu LeBeis HaMokad. There were 4 Lishkos to the Beis HaMokad. Again, that was the central area. Kiktonios Hapsuchos Letraklin. They were like small chambers that opened up into the large central area. Shtayim Bakodesh Shtayim Bachol. Now 2 of them were in the holy part of the Harabayas, and 2 of them were in the parts that was Chol. V'rashe Pispisin Mavdilin Ben Kodesh L'chol. There were wooden stakes that were put up that separated between the Kodesh area and the Chol area. Umar Hayu Meshamshas. What were these smaller Lishkos used for? Ma'aravis Jeromis, the southwestern one, he also Lishkas Teloi Carbon. That was the Lishka of the sheep. Now you already see it over here. Ma'aravis Jeromis, it's the southwest in Meseches Mida that's described as the one for the Tloim. And over here, when it talks about the Tloim, Lishkas Beis HaTloim, B'miksoat Tzfonis Ma'aravis. It's described as the northwest. That's the contradiction in the Mishnayos. We'll continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Tezayin Amud Aleph.